Good morning. Thanks for joining today's webinar, Agile Contracting Best Practices to Maximize Outsourcing Value. I'm Anand. I'm responsible for marketing at People10. I'll be your moderator today. This is a part one of the two-part series, and the second part will be held on November 14th. We have a diverse set of audiences from various parts of the world still signing in. I would like to make a few announcements, and I'll then get back to introducing the speaker. So like we had discussed earlier, you would be getting a fixed price Agile contracts white paper at the end of this webinar series. We have another goodie for you. You would be getting an Agile Outsourcing vendor selection checklist at the end of the webinar. We'll be sending it to you through emails. Then there's the small logistics part of the webinar. Like you see, the GoToMeeting webinar control panel is extremely simple. You can use it to post any questions to us, and we will answer you as soon as we can. You can also use the chat window. So I'll get to introducing the speaker now. Nisha is the co-founder and CEO of People10. She is a dynamic leader with experience in delivering large technology projects in retail, banking, and capital markets. In her past as global board member and senior vice president for operations technology at SG Corporate Investment Bank, she has set up and grown large delivery organizations and managed varied responsibilities like strategic sourcing, management, structuring, leading and sponsoring organization-wide change initiatives, and driving innovation. She is also an active senior consultant in the industry in areas of advanced project management, Agile IT. Bringing forth agility within IT delivery functions is one of her core competency. She holds a master's degree in computer applications from CUSAT, mastery in advanced project management from Stanford University, and is a project management professional and a certified Scrum professional. So before I waste any more time of yours, I'll be handing over this session to Nisha, and she'll get started from here.
Thank you, Anand. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone in whichever part of the world you are. This is Nisha here, and Anand has just given you an introduction about me. And I'm very happy to present to you this session today about Agile contracting. And I hope that you get some valuable inputs from this that you are able to use in your at your workplace. So in the next 45 minutes, we will cover certain aspects of Agile contracting. I would start with maybe taking you through some of the challenges what we face today and introducing to you the Agile context in today's software development world, and also explain a little bit about why we need to move away from the traditional contracting, what is the need of that, and we'll get into some of the typical challenges, or rather the most difficult part of structuring an Agile contract in terms of requirement scoping, and some of the new ways of scoping, and also to help you understand that how you can include Agile way of scoping within your contracts through software sizing. And I will also explain to you a few models that you will encounter when you start software development projects, and how you can choose the right kind of contract model for each of them. That would be what we cover in today's session. And we would, as Anand explained earlier, we would also have a second part in about 2 weeks where I would take you through the rest of it as well, which would cover very detailed aspects of contracting and the clauses. I will explain a little bit about that towards the end. So coming to the context of IT services contract, the purpose, as we all know, is getting the expected delivery through a good agreement, a clear agreement between the customer and supplier. That is the whole idea behind contracting. And in this session, when I say contracts, I'm not just only talking about a particular document which is named as contract. Any document which is agreed between the customer and the supplier, which is legally binding, like a master service agreement or the statement of works or any other legally binding agreements, together form the contract. So the things that I'm going to explain here could be spread across these various documents as well. Coming to how projects were done earlier in the traditional ways of execution, we know that things were done more sequentially. So there was a requirements, probably with a sign-off, then there's a design and a sign-off, a build, then a test and a deploy. So this was very traditional, and waterfall, we all know that. And in this context, the contracts were structured so that it was factoring for upfront requirements gathering, the scope more or less being the same, or rather built into the contract, and there is obviously a sign-off at every stage. And when it comes to deliveries, the contract was also considering the fact that the deliveries are coming late and there is a late business value, and also there were some clauses built in to handle these because the risks are too late to discover. So it is all the fine prints around that. Changes, the way changes are handled in traditional contracting, changes are overwhelming when it happens, and for that very reason changes are very tightly controlled. And everything was centered around scoping your needs very, very clearly. Now coming to the Agile context, what is different here? So if you look at that very first triangle, which is the traditional projects, we worked with the basis of the scope. We know our requirements very clearly. So we fix the scope, and then we estimate the effort for that, and then we compute how much time and cost it would take. So everything was starting with the scope. But when you look at the Agile, the whole notion of fixing the scope does not exist. Most of the time, we don't have requirements, or we have some requirements, or sometimes we do have requirements. So those are the special cases. But there is no need, or rather Agile does not promote you to write down all your requirements and lock in your requirements. So that doesn't exist. So what do? So in this context, we think slightly differently. The pyramid is inverted, which means that we fix a time, and we have probably in our mind, we think that, okay, I want to do something in the next 6 months, and I would probably budget $1 million for that. So you fix the time in your budget in your mind, then you try to see how much business value you can deliver out of that. So that is the basis of your thinking when you want to deliver in Agile. So it's an inverted pyramid. So the question is, definitely you need to have contracts there. How are we going to handle the inverted pyramid scenario when it comes to contracting? So I'm just going to explain to you a few things about factors governing Agile contracts. So that the diagram that you see there, as you can see, there is some business value or working features that are coming out of the project at different constant intervals. So this is what we say is the working software or early business value, and this is one of the main reasons why people go for Agile delivery. And we are sitting here and trying to figure out how we structure Agile contracts. So the fundamentals are, we are ensuring early business value, we are securing the time and the cost, and definitely we are trying to lower the delivery risk. So here the return on your investment is in increments. So every time, after every release or every iteration, you are getting your value realized. One thing I would like to highlight here is that if you are not planning to have multiple releases or incremental deliveries, do not even try going for Agile contracts, because you're just wasting your time. My point here is that let's not just do Agile contracts because it's in fashion and people are talking about it, but the whole fundamental or the reason why we should go for it is really to make sure that we are getting the early business value, we are minimizing the risk, we are securing the time and effort of everyone, and the contract should support these fundamental principles. So now coming to Agile contracts or Agile projects, I did explain to you that we are not fixing the scope, we are fixing the time and cost more or less. So in which case we know beforehand what would be the time, we know beforehand what is the cost that you want to expend. Now the question is, how are you going to measure the scope? Because I did tell you that we do not probably have all the scope or all the requirements in front of us. We do not have detailed specifications. So how are we going to deal with the scope? Which, trust me, is the most challenging thing, and this is the single most important, or rather the common reason why people shy away from getting into Agile contracts, because we really don't know how to scope, or we don't know how to scope and put it down on a piece of paper that both the parties can agree. Now coming to specifics of how are we going to address the scope in Agile. I will spend some time here because, like I explained before, this is the most challenging part. Once we master the fact, or rather once we know how to master the scoping part in Agile, then the contracting part becomes easy. Now scope here, in traditional we know, we say that okay, you make your work breakdown structure, include all the project management and all the other activities in it, and that becomes your scope. Here the definition is slightly different. Scope here is not about all the tasks that you do. Scope here is only about the business value that we deliver. Scope is only about the working features that we deliver. So some examples I have given here is that we are making some reports, we are making some screens to capture some details, we are making some transactions, or we are making some workflows. If it works, yes, it is a value to the business, and that is the scope delivered. So we do measure in terms of epics or features or stories, whatever different levels of granularity we can say, but at the end of the day, scope is measured in terms of working features or business value. And again, I'm highlighting scope is not, in Agile, scope is not about project tasks like reports or making a risk register or task assignment. These kind of things we do not consider as part of measured scope. But if you are getting into a fixed price contract and you want to price those efforts into it, you need to look at it differently and not not as in a very classic way. So you may have to look at those efforts separately and maybe charge it into the project cost. Now coming to how do we measure scope. So normally scope is measured in Agile. We use units. Sometimes we call it story points, feature points. Different people have different point systems. So I've also said XYZ points. So you can use your own point system. No one can stop you from doing that. But at the end of the day, what exactly is this point? People use these terms interchangeably. Sometimes we just, we don't know we're referring to size. We just call it story points. So there is a bit of misuse on this vocabulary as well. But for me, the points is just a measure. So it is like pounds or kilograms to measure weight. We use points to measure the size. So I've shown here some dumbbells. So you can see there are small ones and there are large ones. So the small requirements may be smaller units, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 5. So as it grows in size, it will be X points. So the small dumbbell may be here. I may I may say that the smallest one is maybe 1 story point and the biggest one is maybe 21 story points. So this is how we can measure the size. Size is not equal to effort. One does not mean that you take a day or a month or a week to do that. One is just a measure of the complexity or measure of the weight of that particular requirement. Size is relative, so if you ask one story point, something that is one story point for one project may be a different size than one story point for a different project, because you are comparing features or requirements against each other. So it's all relative. So one is relative to the other, which could be 3 story points. And when we measure size, it is quite important that both the parties, the client and the supplier, agree on it, agree on the parameters of sizing. I'll explain a little bit more on that going forward. There are many ways people measure size. So some people may use very simple things like it's a simple requirement, it's a medium requirement, it's a complex requirement. That's one way of doing that. The other way would be you can use something called t-shirt sizing, so which is small, medium, large, extra large, and such. Another good and a common way of sizing is the Fibonacci series, which is an exponentially increasing series. You might be familiar with that. Why it is exponential? Because as the size grows, the complexity grows. The number of elements, the number of assumptions, the number of uncertainties around it, number of dependencies, all of this can increase. So it is hardly linear. If the size is more, the patterns that we would observe, and this has been tested and tried in many projects and found to be true, is that complexity increases not in a linear fashion but in a more exponential fashion. So it could also be a good way of sizing is that a very small requirement can be of size 1, and then the next larger one could be size 2, but then going forward it is 3 and then 5, 8, 13, 21 and such. And a feature of size 21 is a little dangerous, I would say, because it does not give you a good level of clarity, and sometimes it would just mean that you don't know a lot about it. Coming to the sizing framework that I had explained earlier, that is what we use to measure size, or rather to say that this particular requirement is X size. So you can develop your own sizing framework, which can be very simple to complex ones. Only fact is that you have to factor in the technology aspects, how many acceptance criteria are there for each requirements, any risk associated with that, what is the business complexity. Sometimes you may also want to consider whether you're doing it first time or are you reusing some of the features from requirements from your past. So all these factors can help you factor in. I've given you an example here which actually shows that there are a couple of features, there are 8 features, and against that there are many parameters, and the size is automatically calculated, and the total size of this lot is 28 story points. Okay, the only fact is, and what you should remember here is that do not build a sizing framework in isolation. You can build the sizing framework and agree on the both sides, so that as you go forward in the project and as you discover more and more features, this would become your foundation, and this would become your, I would say your place where you can actually discuss around the feature. You can discuss that, okay, this feature is this big. Why it is so big? Because of these factors. And if there is any change to the size, you can justify that as well, because you can clearly show to people that some parameters have changed, you have added more acceptance criterias, the complexity, or some of these parameters can change, so the size has changed, and that would even justify your extra effort to build that. So this becomes a common point where people can come across and come forward and have a dialogue about the size, or rather the scope. Now I'm going to move into Agile contracts in detail. I have this diagram in front of me. If you can see this, on the x-axis is your clarity of requirements, which means that how clear are your requirements, and on the y-axis you can see the stability, which means that is there a possibility that your requirements can change, or are they going to be constant once defined? So based on these two factors, you can see that your how stable and clear are your requirements. So the gray area that you see in the top right corner, I would call it my number 1 zone, where all your requirements are available and stable. This is a very ideal scenario, and a lot of traditional projects were built around this concept. Like we were saying, the scope is clear. And you see in the middle, the blue, the light blue area, the second zone, is where you might have partial requirements. You may have a high-level view. Some of your requirements may be there. Sometimes you have your requirements and you know that you don't know everything about it. So there is a chance that it can change a bit as well. And in the third zone, and which is the bottom left part, is where you have no requirements. You have no requirements clarity, and you don't know anything. You may just be starting off, maybe developing a new product in the market, or kind of like a research project. You may just have your objectives and goals, and nothing more than that. So the top right one, you may ask, like, why, if everything is clear and available, why do you even need Agile? Because a lot of times people mistake Agile for something which is very volatile and changing. I had explained before, Agile is not just about managing the volatility. Agile is also about early business value, gaining ROI early from your projects. So even though all your requirements are clear, you may still want to deliver in Agile way, because you want to get early business value, and you want to get returns out of your project, and you want to deliver quicker and incrementally. Now, I'm going to use these three scenarios to build the contracting, the 3 types of contracting that we're going to talk about. In first scenario, the one I had explained earlier, everything is clear. The top right gray area, which was our quadrant where all the requirements were clear and everything was stable. And if you're attempting Agile in a stable state, it's still a very good idea. I'll tell you why. Because if you're a large organization and you are trying out Agile for the first time, and you want to make an Agile contract and see what benefits you get out of it, and how you can structure the contract well, this can be a good starting place, I would say, because all these bits and pieces that you see on the screen, those are your features that you can deliver. The nuts and the bolts and all this colorful stuff that I've put. Take those as different requirements that you have to deliver, different features, small, big, all kinds of things. So you know exactly what you want to deliver. You know the size and the shape and everything about it. So it's pretty much classic. I would suggest you can try to deliver this in an incremental way by defining an Agile contract, and this can be, like I said before, it's probably the easiest and the best way to onboard or embrace Agile. In this scenario, what kind of contract do we choose? So it's a fixed scope. You can measure the scope because you have all your requirements. Everything is in front of you. There is no complexity here. So what you can do here is you can have one contract with one statement of work. And in this example here, I have shown you 6 sprints. And I'm assuming that all of you are familiar with the sprints in Agile, which is nothing but iterations. Different people call it in different ways. Nothing but time-boxed iterations where you can demo and deliver incrementally. So in this kind of a fixed price contract, if you are getting into a contract where you are telling the customer that you will deliver this all the scope in 6 sprints, and if you do not deliver on time, that is the red line that I have shown here. If you fail to do that, then obviously, there can be a penalty here because it's a fixed price contract. Now, how do we execute this? Couple of steps I have shown here for executing in the fixed price. First, you size the requirements using the point method and a good sizing framework. Derive the effort and the cost. So if you, through the sizing framework, you realize that maybe you have 50 story points to deliver, and based on your team's capability and your past experience or extrapolation, you know that your team can probably deliver X story points, 10 story points in a sprint. And if 50 story points is the total measure, you can deliver definitely in 5 sprints. So that is where you can agree on the timeline, and you can estimate the cost and your price on the project. And when you execute, you would definitely deliver iteratively. At the end of every sprint, there would be demo, and every few sprints, you would release your delivery into production. Just one point I would like to highlight here is that there are many different types of Agile deliveries. There are product companies and internet companies where Agile deliveries are happening, which we also do on many of our projects, where Agile means slightly different. Agile means that you are putting things into production many a times a day. So that's a different kind of Agile scenario we're talking about. That's more for product development companies. But here, just understand that I am not talking about an Agile delivery scenario where we are delivering on a daily basis. I'm talking about an Agile delivery scenario where there is a customer and there is a supplier, and it's probably a large enterprise context or a large project we're talking about where deliveries are happening not so often, not on a daily basis, but more every few weeks type of scenario, and the projects are fairly sizable. So I hope this scenario is pretty clear to you. One contract, one fixed price contract delivered in Agile iterative manner. Now I'm coming to the second scenario, which was the middle part of it, where you have few requirements. You don't have all the requirements, but you know a couple of features that you want to deliver. At least you have some idea about that. But you know that the project is very large and you don't know what's coming after that. You just know that you have more work to do. So partial requirements or high level. So what do we do about the rest? So in this scenario, what kind of contracts should we go for? What we recommend is you can get into one contract with one supplier, but you can split it into 2 statement of works. The first one, both are fixed price. It's done in 2 parts. The first one is a fixed price contract where you execute the known features, so which means you build what you have in front of you, and in parallel you are sizing the remaining. So it could be based on the experience of building those, plus you're using that time to get a little more clarity on the size of the remaining features or requirements. Mind you, I'm not advocating here go and get all the requirements and detail out the specification. No, we are only talking about high-level sizing, which does not require specifications or the details. Here you would be taking some features, you would be looking at high-level features which are similar, and you would be extrapolating the size to those, and you would be arriving at an X story point that would be your size of the whole project. For example, if you were to do the first part in maybe 3 to 4 sprints, and you have maybe delivered about 100 story points, and using that you would extrapolate the rest of the work remaining to be maybe 1,000 story points or 2,000 story points depending on how big the project is. But it clearly also does not require you to go and elaborate all the requirements. That you would do only when you enter into the project on a sprint by sprint basis. And here I've also mentioned that since you're taking an extrapolation or an estimation of the size based on your initial work, you might want to factor in maybe about plus or minus 50% variance into this. And the second part also can be a fixed price because you do have the size estimated, and as you enter the project you can elaborate the scope and you can deliver in a fixed price mode as well. I hope this model is also clear. Now we come to the third scenario. We have no requirements, we only have objectives and goals, and we really don't know how much we have to do. So in this case, we recommend, again, you can do it in one contract with one vendor, or you can, if you want to split it, that's fine as well. But recommended is you do it with one vendor. Why? Because if a vendor or a supplier is buying into the size for you and they are willing to sign on it, it's better that you're safer going with the same supplier, because choosing another supplier might take you back few steps, in which case you have to again discuss about the size and sizing and requirements and everything from the beginning. So it might be in your best interest, again, if you choose the same supplier. But then you have a choice. You can do as what is best for the organization. Here what you can actually do is one contract, two statement of works. The first one is not a fixed one because we are in an exploration mode. We have nothing. We are just starting with just some goals or concepts. So it can be a time and material, but definitely with a cap, because you do not want to spend a whole lot of money on this. First, maybe you might want to see if the idea is feasible and you really get a good proof of concept out of that. So you can execute with the time and material with a cap on the time and the price, in which you would build proof of concept. Along with that, you would, like in the earlier scenario, you can also size the scope at the high level. Yeah. And here I have factored in more variance because unlike in the previous scenario, you're extrapolating the size and you probably don't have even sample features to compare with. So you are extrapolating the scope, you're estimating the scope, and you might want to factor in 25% plus or minus 25% variance into this, and then agree on a fixed price for the execution part. So the execution part does not change. It is the same in all the three scenarios. It's how you want to deal with the first part of it for the sizing that matters. So just to go back and compare all three scenarios once more, I'm taking you back to the first scenario where we have all the requirements clear. We are executing in Agile mode within a fixed price contract with X number of sprints agreed between the supplier and the customer. First you size the requirements. When you start the project, you have all the requirements, so that's pretty clear. Get the time and effort out of that, then you deliver iteratively. The second scenario is where you have only few requirements, so you can execute the requirements, get those features out, you can release them. At the same time, in parallel, you can size the remaining, and sometimes people also agree on a good sizing framework in this period of time. And the second part of the project is done in a fixed price mode. In the third scenario, the only difference is that the first part is more of a proof of concept while sizing the remaining, and the first part is a time and material not fixed, and the second part remains the same, which is a fixed price execution of the project. So through this, we are now tackling all the different 3 scenarios of contracting, where the requirements are available and stable, and there are only partial requirements available, and in the other scenario where only high-level goals are available. Now, I have a few more points to share with you. Some of the factors that you can consider is that, like I said, the sizing framework sometimes takes a little bit to mature. When you execute the project, it tends to get more and more mature. So you might want to factor in plus or minus X% variance depending on what level of maturity is of your sizing framework. And another important thing that you have to build into your contract is the notion of size instead of scope. So you have to deliberately introduce the size into your contract as part of the vocabulary and give a clear definition to that, so that this is the major change that you have to introduce into the contract, and everything else would come around it. Few other additional considerations. In case you are structuring your contracts with multiple statement of works, example, if you have 3 months fixed iterations and each 3 months is considered as a different statement of work, there is definitely, some people might say that there is a risk of project getting stopped in the middle, and it may not be good for the supplier. So that risk exists. So you can add clauses like if in case the client stops the project, 10% of the contract value can be paid off. You can introduce some of these clauses into the contract, and if the supplier walks away before completing the tenure, you can introduce similar penalty clauses as well into the contract. So in the next part of the session, so this was the part 1. In the next session that we are going to do, we will get more deeper into the contracting clauses, and it would be a continuation of today's session where we have explained the fundamentals and the basics of contracting, which is around scoping, different types of contracts, what are the things to consider. In the next session, we would get more deeper into the contract, and we would explain to you how to structure these clauses into your contract, like the clauses that are normally in a contract, like the purpose of the contract, how Agile contributes to that purpose, what is the definition of scope, how to structure scope in a contract, location specifics, the tenure or the contract period. All these things would be explained. And how do you define your deliverables? What definition would you give to your deliverables? What are the standards, execution standards? How do you define acceptance criteria? How do you define your roles and responsibilities of both the parties in the contract? And other specific expectations in an Agile context, like environment, collaboration expectations. So we would be talking more with respect to contractual clauses, and the language in the next session would be more contract-like. And another important aspect of Agile contracts is how we manage the changes. So that is important as well. So I would explain about the change management. Another important part is how we structure the payment terms. So if the delivery is iterative and continuous, how would the payment terms look like. And I would also share with you a simulation of a payment structure which would complement the application development life cycle. And we would also share with you some do's and don'ts while you are contracting. And we can take some questions if you have any specific questions related to today's information shared here. Feel free to post your questions. Yes, we are getting a lot of questions, so we are trying to address those questions. Please give me a minute. Okay, so the question, we have a question on slide number 15, which I have in front of you. The question is, do you negotiate value with the customer? The value here is not the business value. The value here would be what is the value for that particular parameter. For example, if your parameter is number of acceptance criteria against that particular feature or requirement or story, if they have specified that there are 5 different acceptance criteria, the value there would be 5. So in this case, there would not be a lot of need to negotiate. Rather, these values are all factual. So, and if another parameter is that, maybe I would say number of workflows in that particular requirement, that can be counted. So if there are 3 different workflows, so you can put a value 3. So in which case these parameters would be the relevant parameters applicable in the project, and the value more or less would be the count against those parameters. And sometimes these values would contribute more towards the size, sometimes some values would contribute less. So this sizing parameter would factor in, counting those factors. You can build a formula against your size, that size is a factor of this parameter 1 into weightage plus parameter 2 into weightage, etc. So that's how you would derive it. So to answer your question, value need not be negotiated. The value should be something that you are able to see, or it should be something that you're able to count rather. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, we have a question that in regards to the requirements or delivery stage, would it be best to send in to the client both a business analyst and a high-level SME? Definitely, because you see, even though we have sizing framework, it does require quite a bit of business understanding and some amount of technical analysis to be deriving at the size. So if you are able to deploy your business analyst and the technical SME at the time of scoping and sizing, that is the best possible way. Otherwise, you may find that you are missing out on some of the important parameters, and you might not have considered those, which can cost you dearly later on. We have factored for some variance in scoping and sizing, but we cannot have something going in 100% variance. So we need to be careful that people who are doing the sizing are knowledgeable enough on the subject functionally as well as technically to be able to have a good scoping done. I have an interesting question here. There seems to be little on risks in Agile contracting. Why? I like this question because one of the reasons why we get into Agile contracts, I'm taking you back to the slide where, see, if you look at this slide, the reason why we do get into Agile contracts is we are lowering the delivery risk. It is said that 80% of your business value comes out of 20% of the features. which I also believe it's really true, because we use a lot of complex or rather very common products. For example, Excel is a good example. There are so many features into that, but how many features do we really use? Maybe 2% or 3% features. That is what I'm trying to explain here is that 80% of your business value most of the time comes from 20% of your features. And in Agile, the beauty of Agile is that you are able to prioritize. As a customer, you are able to prioritize and you are able to get your high value, high risk stuff earlier on in the project. And whatever money you're spending on developing something, you are getting working software in return, which means that your risk is much less. If you are into 6 sprints and you might already be having a lot of things running in your production life system that is coming out of the project. So which means that yes, there is a risk associated as in any project, but if you compare Agile projects to traditional, your risk is much lower. The only thing we need to ensure here is that the delivery happens frequently and as agreed. So if if your demos are not happening after the sprints, or if your releases are not happening on time, that is something that you have to factor in the contract. But apart from that, being Agile contract, there are not too many risk-related clauses that you need to add, because you would know very early whether you are getting it or not. And then you have a choice to make whether you want to invest more into a project which is not giving you any value. So by nature of being Agile, the risk is covered by itself. Yeah, I have another question here. The question is, going back to my 3 examples, the changes are common in each sprint. So how does that work? It's an interesting question. So I would like to explain it with one slide here. Yeah, so for example, so let's take this example. So I have a lot of requirements here. So if I decide to do maybe the square that you see here, the purple square, maybe that's a requirement that we had decided to do. And during the course of the project, the customer tells me that I don't want to do purple square, I want a red square. So it is easy to exchange these, because we have the size. Maybe if the purple square is 5 story points, I can tell the customer, fair enough, you can take out the purple square and you can introduce something which is of the same size. So same size could mean the green circle, the red square, or the black triangle. You understand? So I have the flexibility of taking out something of the same size and introducing something else which is of the same size, as long as I don't have any other dependency with other features that would, impact the size of my other features. I would give the flexibility to the customer to take out something and put in something else, provided the size is the same. It need not be exactly the same requirement. But if size is more, if somebody wants to take out something of 3 story points and bring in something of 5 story points, then we may have to charge additionally for the 2 story points of the extra size that we would deliver. I hope that answers that question. Yes, so again, the question is, changes often follow demos, and so each next sprint may change. Well, that could very well be. So we need to be really clear why the change is coming. Is the change coming because of something we did not deliver right, in which case that change is free? We have to accommodate that in the project and give that to the customer for free. But if the change is coming because the customer, or maybe change is coming because only 5 acceptance criteria were thought of, and they're introducing another acceptance criteria, in which case the size changes. If size changes, it has additional cost. If size does not change, we do not ask for extra cost. I hope that's clear, because size is, we are not agreeing to a specification, we are agreeing to a size. So whenever there is a change, you can do a resizing exercise. You can go back to all your sizing parameters and look at it again as to, has any of these parameters values increased? So is the size moving from 3 to 5? Which means that if the customer had agreed on a size 3 feature, which is now becoming size 5, it's not the supplier's problem, because this is also the equivalent of the traditional scope creep. When you show something, they say, no, I want more. When you show it again, they say, no, I'm not happy, which could be a little tricky to explain to the customer that you're asking more and more and more. I had not bought into that. But when you have a good scoping framework, sizing framework in front of you that you had both agreed on, this becomes much easy. You can negotiate using that. You can say that, look, in this parameter, the value we agreed was so many. Now, because of your changes, the size is going up. So how do we do about it? Either we say that, okay, then we do not change, or we pay extra for the change, or you swap that with something else. So that's one way of looking at it. Yeah, I think I got the message that you got it. Thank you. Right. I think we have a few more questions, but I'm sorry, because of lack of time, I'm not able to answer all the questions. But I thank you so much for all your valuable questions, and I think they were really great. And I really enjoyed having this session with you. I do hope that I would get to spend the following session, the session 2, with all of you again, where we would get down to the contractual clauses, and we will look at all the things that I had explained earlier in the next session. And I hope that this session has been informative, and you got your expectations satisfied. If you have any questions on these sessions, you can still contact me. I have my email on the screen. You can reach out to me through email, and I would try to answer your questions. Or you can contact us through our website as well. I guess that's it for today. And please surely do join us on November 14th for the part 2 of this webinar series. Have a good day.